She didn't scream. She didn't cry. She just stared as they strapped her down, inserted the needle, and prepared to end the life of one of Texas's most hated women. Lisa Coleman wasn't just convicted of murder. She became a symbol of everything broken. A woman who had once been the victim but turned into a monster. Her crime? Unspeakable. A 9-year-old boy beaten, starved, and bound like an animal. When police found his tiny, lifeless body stuffed into a plastic bin, even seasoned detectives broke down. No last-minute appeal, no vigil outside the prison gates, no one waiting to stop what was coming. This is the story of Lisa Coleman's final 24 hours. The countdown to an execution that left no one protesting. And a crime so disturbing, silence was the loudest response. Lisa Ann Coleman was born in Texas in 1975, and her life began in a nightmare she never escaped. From the moment she could walk, she was beaten, neglected, and discarded by the very people meant to protect her. Her earliest memories were not of toys or bedtime stories, but of fists, screaming, and silence. She was shuffled from one unstable, violent household to another. At one point, she lived in a home with 10 other children, often left unfed and locked inside rooms for hours. When the state intervened, she was placed in foster care. But the trauma didn't stop there. Some reports suggest she was sexually abused while in state custody. No one checked in. No one noticed when she stopped smiling. By age 11, Lisa was already using drugs. By 14, she had attempted suicide. When she was placed in juvenile detention, she was described as aggressive, emotionally unstable, and deeply broken. But instead of therapy, she got confinement. In one chilling report, a facility worker said, "She didn't act like a child. She acted like someone who had already seen hell." Coleman never learned how to love, how to trust, or how to cope. She only learned how to survive, and sometimes how to hurt. Authorities later admitted that every system meant to save her had failed. And by the time she was 20, she was living with her girlfriend, Marcella Williams, and Marcella's young son, Davontae, a child who would come to know the same pain Lisa had once lived through. That boy would never make it to his 10th birthday. Over time, neighbors began to notice that Davontae had all but disappeared. No more laughter echoing in the courtyard, no more running footsteps across the upstairs floor. A once curious, energetic little boy had seemingly vanished. Those who had seen him described a child who was always quiet, always looking down. A boy who winced when adults got too close. He had been pulled out of school months earlier. No birthday party, no toys in the yard. It was as if someone had tried to erase him. When a welfare check was finally requested in July 2004, police officers knocked on the door, but nothing could prepare them for what they would find inside. Inside a back room was a plastic storage bin, and inside that bin was Davontae's lifeless body, curled unnaturally, weighing just 36 pounds. His bones protruded through his skin, his face was bruised, his feet were bound with torn fabric. The smell of infection lingered in the room. The autopsy was horrific. Davontae had broken ribs, some of them healing, others fresh. His body was covered in open sores, and he had deep ligature marks on his ankles and wrists. It was clear he had been tied up repeatedly, for hours, maybe days at a time. His stomach was nearly empty. His arms were skeletal. He had been starved systematically. But that wasn't all. Blunt force trauma to his head and chest had ruptured internal organs. His injuries weren't from a single incident. They were built up over weeks, maybe months. The cause of death was listed as malnutrition, worsened by infection and trauma. But what killed him wasn't just hunger. It was slow, deliberate cruelty. Lisa Coleman wasn't just charged with murder. Prosecutors brought capital murder for killing a child under 10 while restraining him against his will. In the eyes of the law, it was torture that ended in execution. On July 26, 2004, both Lisa and Marcella were arrested. Marcella, the boy's biological mother, took a plea deal, life in prison. But Lisa refused. She claimed innocence, blamed the system, pointed fingers at everyone but herself, even Marcella. But the prosecution came prepared to bury her. In court, the atmosphere was electric with tension. Witness after witness painted a picture of torment behind closed doors. Neighbors described the sound of a child screaming, and then silence. A school official broke down in tears, describing how Davontae stopped showing up and how no one followed up. Then came the physical evidence. When the prosecution displayed photos of Davontae's frail, lifeless body, curled inside a storage bin, ribs jutting from beneath his skin, the courtroom gasped audibly. Several people in the gallery began to cry. One seasoned juror reportedly turned away, hands clenched tightly in her lap. But the photos were only the beginning. Forensic reports detailed how Davontae's wrists bore deep, permanent grooves, scars from being bound with ligatures for hours at a time. The medical examiner described bruising consistent with repeated blunt force trauma. Not just one instance, but a pattern of sustained abuse. Some injuries had partially healed, others were fresh. His stomach had been nearly empty for weeks. He had been slowly wasting away in plain sight. Lisa's personal journals added another layer of horror. In passages read aloud by the lead prosecutor, she wrote about punishment routines and control tactics. "He needs to learn to obey," one entry read. Another listed how long Davontae could go without meals before he started to beg. The courtroom was silent. It was no longer just abuse. It was ritualized cruelty documented in her own handwriting. The defense tried to argue trauma, to redirect attention to Lisa's own broken childhood. But the jury had already seen the aftermath. The bruises, the starvation, the bin. Prosecutors called it torture, cold, calculated, unrelenting. The verdict came fast. The sentence was final. Lisa Coleman was sentenced to die. For nearly a decade, Lisa Coleman lived in the shadows of the Mountain View unit in Gatesville, Texas, one of the few prisons in the country housing women on death row. She spent her days in a tiny concrete cell, locked down 23 hours a day, surrounded by silence, fluorescent lights, and the constant hum of the prison's aging ventilation system. Her world was gray, her future always on hold. She became a ghost to the outside world, rarely visited, barely mentioned, often forgotten. But today, everything felt different. This was the day she would die. July 15, 2014. At exactly 6 a.m., Lisa opened her eyes. The same cement walls, the same steel toilet. But this morning, she was on the clock. The countdown had begun. Correctional officers performed the morning count, stopping outside her door longer than usual. Lisa said little. She didn't ask for a chaplain. She didn't request special music or a Bible. Her demeanor was flat, emotionless. It was as if she had already accepted her end long before this morning. Unlike many inmates who use their last day to reach out to loved ones, Lisa had no visitors, no final phone call, no handwritten goodbye. The only thing she did receive was her last meal, but even that was routine. At around 4 p.m., she was served baked chicken, a side of overcooked vegetables, a piece of dry bread, and fruit punch. She barely touched any of it. As the clock ticked towards 6 p.m., she was led into the death chamber, shackled and silent. Outside the viewing area, reporters waited. Inside, behind the glass, stood family members of Davontae, the 9-year-old boy whose death had horrified the nation. Lisa was strapped down onto the gurney. Her arms were secured. An IV line was inserted into her vein. The room fell silent as a warden stepped forward and asked if she had any final words. "I just want to tell my family that I love them and I thank them for all the support. Thanks for everything. Love you all. See you, Mom." Then she turned her head toward the witness room. Her voice trembled. "Thank you, everyone. I'm sorry for what happened. I'm sorry." Without another word, the lethal dose of pentobarbital began to flow. Within moments, her eyelids fluttered. Her chest rose once, then stilled. She was pronounced dead at 6:24 p.m. She was 38 years old. There were no cheers, no protests, just a long, cold silence, and the quiet sound of a body bag being zipped closed. Lisa Coleman was the 15th woman executed in the United States since 1976, and the 9th in Texas. Her case reignited national debates over the death penalty, childhood trauma, and whether a person raised in hell could ever truly be held accountable for what they became. But for many, those arguments vanished the moment they saw the crime scene photos. A little boy, Davontae, reduced to skin and bone, bruised and broken, stuffed into a bin like trash. His eyes permanently shut, his suffering etched into every inch of his body. His injuries weren't random, they were patterned, deliberate. In court, a juror described the experience as being haunted. "We didn't just see evidence, we saw what it means to die slowly." Coleman claimed she didn't mean for him to die, that she didn't know how bad it had gotten. But the prosecution's timeline, her own journals, and the cold forensic facts told a story of slow, calculated torment. To the jury and the law, that was more than enough. Some final hours are filled with regret, others are just empty. Lisa Coleman's last day was quiet, but the crime she committed left a scar that silence can't erase. Subscribe to Death Row Stories for more real cases, final moments, and the justice that followed.